Hello and welcome to The Download from Wise Woman and Wordsmith, where insight meets inspiration. A space for creatives, dreamers and visionaries ready to spark new ideas, ignite purpose and reimagine possibilities. Here we share downloads of wisdom, stories and strategies to help you thrive in your creative journey. I'm your host, Jill Marshall. Tune in, connect and let the magic unfold.
Show you tomorrow.
Welcome, I'm your host, author and creator, Jill Marshall. Today we're talking about the download response, which is when you receive information in direct response to a question you might not even have known you were asking. As Liz Gilbert would say, this is where the big magic happens. So as an author, one of the questions you get asked fairly regularly is where you get your ideas from. There are many different answers to this, and it will vary from writer to writer and creative to creative. But a simple answer is that some ideas are made and some ideas are sent. The ones that are made are often in response to a request by someone else. If you're lucky enough to have a publisher or agent or producer, they may ask you to create something that works for their next sales campaign, for their next event, for their stable of work. If you're entering a competition, you'll probably be following a certain theme. And if it's academic, you'll have certain parameters. So these are the times when you roll up your sleeves and set to with at least a bit of a plan as to where you'll end up. The times that these ideas are sent are quite different. They can literally come out of nowhere, often at a moment when you're not really focused on anything related. On a walk in the forest, taking a shower is quite a common one, and of course in a dream, or while you're in that liminal space between sleeping and waking. Several of my own downloads have followed instances of magic that came to me in a very ordinary way, which is via the TV. I suspect this is because, for me, I'm not really watching it that closely. And again, I'm in that halfway space where my subconscious mind can wander off and gather material. So, for example, take the second book in my series about Catgirl and saviour of witch kind and more, Matilda Peppercorn. This book is called Toadstone, and this is significant because it meant I'd already had the idea for it after a particular scientific phenomenon had been reported on the news, to do with, yep, you guessed it, toads. I'd parked that idea several months or years before with a view to making it happen sometime in the future. But when I came back to the story after many months to start the book in earnest, I couldn't remember some essential details other than it happened in Europe somewhere. So after some hours of staring at the screen and not really getting anywhere, I went downstairs to make a cuppa and distract myself with a squiz at the TV. I do this quite a lot and often watch documentaries so it doesn't interfere with my fiction brain. So on went the Discovery Channel. And lo and behold, the exact event in Europe that I've been thinking about popped up on the screen. I literally just sat there with my Tetleys and watched half an hour of detailed explanation of what had happened to those toads in Germany, and then I went straight back up to my laptop and started writing. And so Tilly 2 was born. Another occasion was when I was about to start my third book in a 4-book deal with Penguin for adult fiction. I'd already written about 2 of 3 friends, and I was planning to cover the third in this third book. But the publishing director didn't connect with the premise or the title, which sort of threw me. I told him over our coffee in a very crowded cafe that I had one other idea, but at that stage it was really just a title. And that title was The Most Beautiful Man in the World. That sounds good, he said. Write that. And such are the market dynamics of publishing, but that's for another time. So I'd honestly set off into the novel with no idea really who or what this book was about. A few characters poured onto the page, a number of incidents and plot-turning events zipped through my fingertips onto the screen, but I still didn't understand what was driving this person, this so-called beautiful man. Writing stalled, so I wandered off to the TV again and turned on a random program expecting a wildlife documentary. Instead, I found a man discussing a lesser-known psychiatric condition, with very detailed research and, frankly, horrifying evidence of what this condition could lead to. That presenter was suddenly, blatantly, intensely angered in a flash by the children playing outside his home. And then came the reveal. Straight to camera, he told us that he suffered from the condition himself. And then came the reveal for me. I had my why. In an instant, I understood all the characters, all the plot turns, every nuance in a fairly complex novel. That book, I have to say, poured out of me in a dream state like a chunk of my soul. So I hardly remember writing it. It was sent and I merely translated. I would add that this condition I'd been sent is now talked about on a daily basis and literally all over YouTube by everyone and anyone who mentions gaslighting, stonewalling, vampiric supply, and so on. It's pretty common these days to call someone a narcissist, but this is deeper than that. It's about actual narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, which is very much more dangerous, was little discussed at the time, and is still probably confused with someone being arrogant and self-absorbed. And the download for me was about someone more like the kind of very creepy character Hugh Grant might play these days. The download took me into new territory that I'd no prior knowledge of, and this is what the scent idea can often do. This is rather like the most transcendent, extraordinary story I ever received in this way via the TV. It's a story I have not yet turned into a book and may not. It was so complete, so shimmering in its magical entirety, that I don't know that it could be improved upon by being fictionalized. It was another odd moment of reaching for the remote for distraction. So when I'm working at home, writing or coaching or creating, I'm very disciplined and I tend to work flat out with limited breaks. Often I break off because I've hit a wall and I need some inspiration. I don't know what had caused me to roam from my room that afternoon, but I do know that I felt afterwards as if a trail of stardust had led me to that program. This documentary, and I'm telling this from memory, so may have missed or mismatched some of the details, was centred on a team of historians digging in a field in France for a plane that had gone down during World War II. Villagers had reported seeing the plane crash in the distance. And I don't recall now why they hadn't investigated at that point, or how the wreckage had come to be so completely buried, but it had been some time before. The search, and probably the programme, was funded by Parker Pens, who believed that the young American pilot shot down over the area had been flying a plane that was sponsored by Parker. A time team of scientists, geologists, and historians had pored over the data to establish that this plane in this field was likely to be the one belonging to their pilot, even though the pilot himself had parachuted out to safety and had gone home. There were many variables and risks in the dig: getting the right field, getting the right spot in the field, relying on the oral evidence of one very elderly villager. But dig they did, and before too long, they hit metal. And the excitement in this programme is palpable. Segments of wreckage are painstakingly removed, brushed off, identified and peered at to see if it is indeed the Parker Pen plane. Suddenly there's a commotion from deep in the ground. The producer starts waving his hands at the camera and the presenter rushes over to explain that there's been a development and filming must stop because they found a skeleton. This is no longer an interesting archaeological site. This is a death scene. The upset and anguish caused to the team by the unexpected turn of events is evident. With the greatest of respect, they stop filming and set about recovering the bones of the pilot, along with any evidence of who he might be. And the next televised scene is an explanation of what had gone on, with the presenter holding out some identity tags. Not American, Australian. And so the tale unfolded further. The Australian pilot, Smith, or Smithy to his friends, was one of a crack team of Aussie aviators who were based out of Red Hill in Surrey in the UK. One day, as with so many young men and women, he didn't make it back to base. His family, his poor family, had never known for sure what had happened to him, until the Parker family from the USA instigated a search into some indeterminate random field in France. And then the magic, this heartbreaking and heart-affirming magic, didn't stop there. The Australian squad had been so unusual, so distinctive, that they'd actually been interviewed and captured on some very crackly, jumpy film footage. And in it, the camera roams along the platoon, rows of handsome lads laughing and shoving each other, and one calls out, "Isn't that right, Smithy?" The camera then pans directly to a tall, dark-haired, reserved young man who nods with a wry smile. "Smithy, it's Smith, our pilot." Because of this program, a family on the other side of the world were able to say farewell to a son, brother, a brave young man who died over 70 years ago in an anonymous and barely distinguishable location. How the universe shifted all this into position we may never ever know. But if any evidence were ever needed that we are all connected and that we go on being connected, then this is it. The Parker Pen Company didn't find what they were looking for. Instead, a lost soul found his way home. And for me, there's always been one final remaining piece of the puzzle. Why did I watch that program that afternoon, seemingly at random? I've always assumed that I will one day incorporate it into a book, because I'm a writer and that's what we do. But that would mean losing or adapting some of the facts, and as I mentioned, it's so complete, it's such a download, that I don't know how or why it would be changed. Maybe there was a purpose to me, a fascinated writer watching that program. Maybe it was just to share this tale. If anyone who reads this shares it with someone who could be heartened, comforted, or uplifted by this tale, then it goes on connecting us, one to the next, to the next, to the next. And for this lesson in the unlimited power of love, like Smithy, we go on. But what do all these examples tell us about the download? For me, it's a sign that we're connected with something very much bigger than us, that's guiding our creative work in unexplainable ways. In every instance, I was stuck at some point in my process, and I asked, perhaps even subconsciously, for help. In the case of Matilda Peppercorn, Toadstone, the answer came immediately. For The Most Beautiful Man in the World, it took about a week, while what's been referred to as the boys in the back room tweaked the machinery to deliver the solution to me. The story of Smithy and the Parker Pen plane came when I needed uplifting, and it ties in with themes and eras that inspire and fascinate me and do get recreated in many of my books. The other interesting thing to me is that the download doesn't always beam into a chorus of angelic singing. It can be very, very mundane and prosaic while you're watching Real Housewives or Top Gear. It doesn't always have to be creative or arty. It could be scientific or techie. It could be a solution to an everyday issue. But what you'll realize is these three things. 1, it answers a question you're asking, even if you didn't know it. And that answer may take you into very unfamiliar territory. 2, it twangs your intuition, like a guitar solo in a stadium, so you know that it feels different to your other thoughts and ideas. And 3, it's complete and ready for action and wants you to act on it straight away. Leave it for too long and it could float off to someone else. In the case of Smithy, I feel that may float off to someone else, but I'm happy to have been a part of that. So I hope you found a little inspiration and upliftment in this episode, folks. Happy creating and solution finding, everyone. And be sure to tune in for more discussions about inspiration, creativity, books and publishing and more in The Download. With love, light and laughter, I'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to The Download podcast. Feel free to like, comment and share and all of that good stuff. And for more about my books, coaching and business services, please check out wisewomanandwordsmith.com. Also, I'd love to hear more about your own intuitive hits and downloads, so do find us on Facebook, YouTube and more.